US reality and reality from the world where I'm living. So it's a little bit different. It's not all things can be used, actually, frankly speaking.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
mhm.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's cultural and legal differences between countries, and also, I mean, what we need to learn is critical thinking and not memorization. So multiple choice type of exams, what they do is that they force people to memorize things, and then they remember them, short term. But if they didn't comprehend them, in a critical thinking sense, then they don't remember them in a long term, and that's kind of problematic in today's world. Even the Society for Human Resource Management, their certification exams are multiple choice, more or less, and I just don't think that that's the right kind of learning. But that's what most exams and tests are based on, that type of a memorization type of learning.
Yes.
Well,
So
let's see if
people,
anybody else joins
yes,
us
they're
today.
asking for the links, so I will send the link in the
Okay,
chat.
thanks. Yeah, I didn't put it in a WhatsApp. Omer, Olga, how you doing? Samia, good to see you.
Thank you, Professor. Hello, everyone.
Very good, thank you.
Hello, Professor.
Hey, how you doing, Omer? Olga,
I'm
how you
fine. How
doing?
are you?
Good, good.
Good.
We're just talking about time differences because for most of you it's evening time, and it's morning over here. So how is everybody doing? Do you have any questions about anything?
Oh my God, we are in the wrong room a while ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, I didn't put it in a WhatsApp. I just keep forgetting to put it in a WhatsApp because I don't have a WhatsApp on my computer or on my phone. I guess I should download the WhatsApp app on my laptop as well.
But that's okay. We found you.
But I always put the link in a course, the announcements. But it's okay, you're here now.
Yeah, we found you.
Right. Good, Jillian, that's good. Well, we'll talk today about global human resource management. So that'll be probably the most applicable chapter for all of you living in foreign, I mean, outside of the United States, because many of you are expatriates, and global HR is really the most applicable. So in a way, the whole course could be about global human resources because they are US specific topics, but this will be a little bit more applicable. And then today will be next weekend will be our last lecture, and then just have the final assignments wrap up, and that's it. So close to an end. It feels like a really long semester.
Especially today is the darkest month of the year. So in here it's 8 o'clock, but it's very dark.
Yeah. I remember. So where are you, children?
British Columbia, Canada.
Oh yeah. That's very dark. That's kind of like Finland, where I grew up. It's very dark right now. Yeah, I get it. I first 20 years of my life I lived in that darkness, so I understand. And I'm gonna go to visit Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska, a month from now, and so it'll be very dark there still in January. Yeah, it gets kind of depressing after a while, but British Columbia, it's beautiful out there, right?
It's beautiful, but it's cold. It's rainy.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit overcast over here right now too, and but it's not cold at all. It's probably like upper 60s, low 70s. So in Fahrenheit. I don't even know what's that in Celsius anymore. I've forgotten how to even convert Celsius. I grew up on Celsius and meters and metric system, and now I'm so accustomed to United States that I'm thinking everything in miles and Fahrenheit. It's kind of crazy that we have to be, different from the rest of the world over here.
Yeah, even the kilograms in the pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Didn't you ask your
Yeah.
weight? You need to convert it to.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why US can't go to metric system. This doesn't make sense, but because it's so much better. You can do calculations in metric system that you cannot do on the US system, because you can convert between units, because everything is the same, like kilograms. So you can 1 liter is 1 kilogram. So if you have to measure how much water you have in a pool, you can do that using a metric system, but you cannot use, you cannot make that kind of calculation, using American system.
Yeah, well, now I convert the 70 Fahrenheit to 21 to Celsius is only 21. That's a pretty good weather there.
Yes, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean it's warm over here in southern Alabama, Gulf Coast region. It's actually hotter over here than Florida most of the time. So because there's no winds that go across the Florida peninsula, so our summers are just overwhelmingly hot over here, and the humidity is really bad. So I mean, summers are bad. Right now is the best part of the year. I mean, this is wonderful. I wish it would be like that all the time. I would not complain. I mean, anything like low 70s is like perfect.
Yeah. So most country that have that weather is the ticket is expensive to travel. If
Right.
the
Yeah.
perfect weather.
Yeah. Yeah, Finns, they travel to Mediterranean countries, anywhere, where it's warm, middle of the winter, because everybody has to take a vacation to survive the winter.
Mm-hmm. Especially here, if you have dogs, if you need to go and walk in the morning.
Oh yeah, I have 2 Siberian Huskies. I have to walk them every morning, so I know
Really,
if I would be up there, I would.
My friend have 2 husky also, and if he's not around, I need to go and walk.
Here's my one over here. If you can see lower hand corner, and then my other one is over there on the other side.
Oh wow!
They are my office assistants. They're sleeping behind me. Okay, I think that people are mostly here.
We are thin now.
Yeah, it's my funny how my huskies, they have to follow me everywhere, and they're right behind me when I hear a computer. So okay, let me share this with you. We'll like I said, we'll talk about global human resource management today. So during this next couple of hours, if you have any stories to share, please share, so that doesn't have to be just me talking, but yeah, I mean, because you probably working in an international environment there, so you probably have a lot of examples to share about things that we'll talk about today. We have this has been mentioned so many times that obviously the challenge of managing globally is that what works in one country may not work in another, and that's obvious. I mean, there are cultural differences, legal differences. I mean, even differences between people. I think I mentioned the difference, when the Mercedes-Benz and Chrysler merged, or most accurately, Mercedes acquired Chrysler. It was a perfect case study example of how things were just different between countries. I mean, the executive compensation was different. The way people communicated was different. Just a lot of different things. I think I mentioned that to you, that they kind of described it like it was like a difference between coconuts and peaches. They say that Germans were very much like coconuts, they were harsh and tough from outside, but once you get to know them, in other words, crack the coconut open, there is sweet coconut milk inside, but they were very sweet and nice inside. Americans are very polite and very soft and very peachy from outside, but once you cut them open, there's a hard core like a peach rock inside there. So they say that culturally it was kind of like that, between coconuts and peaches. And Germans and Americans in business environment did not really know how to relate to each other. Also, there was real differences between, like I said earlier, executive compensation. It was difficult to align those because US executives get paid so much more than German executives, although German executives do have more perks, company provided transportation, housing, those kinds of perks. And that's just because of the cultural differences in compensation between countries. But those were problematic. And also unionization. Germany is very, very unionized. And there are some big unions in Germany that kind of govern everything, and they are kind of connected with government. And everything is very structured and systematic in terms of compensation in all different positions. And of course, that's not the case in US, although car industry, of course, in manufacturing is quite unionized in US also, but there's just differences between the systems. So there were lots of those kinds of differences that resulted in the merger or the collaboration between Mercedes and Chrysler not working out. And so Mercedes bought Chrysler for way more than it was worth, and they ended up selling it for way less than they bought it. So it was a really bad business deal from beginning to end. At the same time, I think his name was Schmidt, who was in charge in Mercedes at the time. There's a book called Wheels on Fire, and the book talks about the deals, how they make the deal. And Schmidt said that even though at the end of the day he after everything was said and done and they learned their mistakes, they said that if they would have to do it again, they would still do it, because on paper everything made perfect sense. But it was a perfect example of how culturally, cultural differences, political differences, legal differences, social differences, just end up ruining a perfectly good business deal. So those are the kinds of things, where the differences are faced. Obviously political environment. In a global business class, we go over capitalism versus communism versus socialism and all these kinds of political systems. We go over religions. We go over a lot of those kinds of different things, because in order to understand the differences, managers in a global environment have to understand some of those political systems, socioeconomic system, economic systems, and also the types of different legal systems. US is an interesting legal system because we have case law over here. So everything has to be argued in a court, and then the president from that case is going to set the future of all those kinds of cases. Many other countries have the kind of law where everything is written in law books. It's not really so much about cases setting a precedent. It's law library filled with different laws that dictate exact punishment for exact things. Japan, for example, is that kind of country. Singapore is that kind of country. Finland is actually that kind of country. They have that kind of law system where things are not argued in cases in law in the same way like in US. And so that's pretty critically important. You may remember back in the day when Singapore, they had some US diplomats who were, the sons of the US diplomats were doing some graffiti or something, and it was considered vandalism. And according to Singapore law, they would have to be, caned. In other words, whipped with the cane on their behind. Well, the US diplomats were all up in arms about it and saying that would be torture, that we don't do that kind of thing in US. And Singaporeans said, well, that's too bad, because that's the way we do it in Singapore. So, your kids are going to be caned, and that's all there is to it. And it's just a different punishment system, and they had to deal with it. I always remember in Singapore, when visiting in a hotel restroom, and you look, there's a sign that says $500 fine for not flushing the toilet. And first thing that I'm thinking is, where's the camera? How do they know that I'm not flushing the toilet? So the point is that in Singapore there are strict rules and punishments and those kinds of things, and there are warning signs everywhere saying this is the fine that you pay for this and this. And the privacy laws are also very different, so that they can monitor people in a very different way than US. So I mean, the list goes on and on and on about those kind of cultural differences, and you guys are probably very, very aware of those in your life and experiences. But that's, I find it very fascinating. Just something like communication. We all know that nonverbal communication can sometimes be as high as up to 80%. Some extreme estimates, they say that up to 80% of communication could be nonverbal. Typically they say it's like 40-50%, but it could be in certain cultures, certain situations, that's significant. So there's high context and low context societies in terms of communication. Edward Hall, talks about it. There's a book called Silent Language that talks about body language and nonverbal, and how different, like in some countries, shaking your head means yes and nodding your head means no, which is exactly other way in the United States. In some countries, when people react to embarrassment or fear, they may be smiling, and that can be considered insulting in other countries. So it's just interesting. I mean, something like okay sign can be meaning a lot of different things in different countries. So those are the kinds of things. In Thailand, you don't want to touch somebody's head because that's closest to the god. So that's considered holy part of your body. You cannot point the bottom of your foot towards somebody because that's the dirtiest part of your body, because it's the most far away from God. So you don't want to point your bottom of your foot towards somebody. So in business communications, you can be sitting out there and just not even realizing how your body language is insulting somebody. And so I just find it interesting. And just language. You maybe have heard about when Chevy had the car called Nova. Chevy Nova was, relatively popular car in US, although a very bad car back in the day. And they tried to sell Chevy Nova in Latin America, in Spanish-speaking countries. Well, in Spanish-speaking countries, Nova means it doesn't go. So why would you buy a car that says it doesn't go, doesn't move? So even certain words translated to other or certain words used in other cultures can be completely opposite of what you wanna communicate. So international human resource management is really deals with those kinds of concepts and techniques that employees can use to manage human resources challenges and of the international corporations or operations. It's important because all business is international business. There used to be MBA programs. I remember very clearly still that there were a lot of MBA programs that were specifically international business programs, and now they are kind of disappearing a lot because all business is international business. So, I mean, you have to talk about international. Almost every management class now has one chapter, at least in the textbook, dealing with international applications. So strategic management, we talk about the international. Economics, we always talk about international. In fundamentals of management, we'll talk about the international aspects, and then of course human resources. So it's kind of a over stretching kind of topic in all aspects of management these days. So again, those are the kind of, this is a kind of a good little craft to remember, that cultural, labor relations, economic, legal, political, those are just the kind of practices that end up impacting a lot of what we do. So if you are have ever heard of Hofstede, and you can Google Hofstede. There's a website from Hofstede organization. He was a researcher, and there's an organization, like I said, that still provide training in Hofstede's methodology. And he did his study on these things in, IBM employees back in the day globally. And so that can be criticized a little bit also, that, he only used one company, originally for the study. But since then, it has been validated in multiple other studies, and these are pretty well accepted. So these are some of the, this is a very effective, I think, useful way of understanding cultural differences. And that's why we keep talking about Kurt Hofstede study. So what he realized, that there are these 5 different ways that cultures are different. And one is power distance. In some countries, there is a lot of hierarchy, so there's distance between a CEO and the entry-level employees would be a huge gap. You don't address your seniors, you don't address your superiors. And if you do, you have to, like in Japan, even in Japanese language, there's a very different nuance or different words and different way that you talk to somebody who is above you versus somebody who is sort of equal level. So some countries have definite power distance. The distance between entry-level employee and a CEO in a corporation might be very, very wide. And then some countries, the power distance between people is very narrow, meaning that people can call each other, first name basis and so forth and so on. In Finland, we have a system where, you have to, there's a language that you use towards somebody when you don't know them really well. That is different from, the way you talk to somebody if you know them well, kind of like a formal and non-formal. And, there is kind of a point where when you kind of move from the non-verbal to verbal, and sometimes you even ask a permission to address somebody in a kind of a less formal way. And so that just illustrates that there's more of a power distance in Finland than there would be in US. Think about it. In US, we talk about even well-known, CEOs that we don't know about, Elon Musk or, Steve Jobs, obviously is not alive anymore, but we almost talk about these people almost like their first name. It's crazy. We never know them, and they are completely in a different league than we are, but still talk about them almost in their first name. In corporations, it's not unusual at all for people to refer to their CEO on first name basis. And managers generally have open door policies in US. You can go talk to your superiors and managers pretty openly. And, many other countries that would be unspoken, unspeakable, to do it that way. So that's the power distance, how much distance there's between people, between different ranks. Individualism, there are individualist countries and there are collectivist countries. So collectivist countries are countries where, teamwork and doing things in groups and prioritizing group over individual is sort of the norm. Japan is very much that way. Japan is a very collectivist country, and Asian countries are typically very collectivist countries. There's always a focus on team, always focus on a group and kind of community. And there are many, many examples of how Japan is that way. If you open a store on the street, a new restaurant or a new store, I can tell you where I learned about these things. So Kentucky Fried Chicken was the first company that first American fast food company that went into Japan, in Tokyo. And the guy who was in charge of that transition or moving to opening their stores in Tokyo was my neighbor in Hawaii Kai, which is a neighborhood close to Honolulu. His name is Floyd, and I don't remember his last name right now. So Floyd told me these stories about, what he had to do in Japan. And so when they opened a new Kentucky Fried Chicken store, they had to go and give gift baskets, almost like bribes, to all of the other, stores on that street. Because if they wouldn't bribe them almost, they would, boycott the new store, and they would make sure that the customers would never come there. So you have to be accepted by the community, the entire street, to open a store. And then you have to bring a Shinto priest. Even though, most Japanese are Christian, they still hold to the Buddhist, values. And, you have a priest that has to be brought out there to bless the store. And it's just a lot of interesting examples of how they do things and sort of collectively. And there's these sort of rituals and things like that, in which United States, we are the most individualistic nation in the world. People are me over here. They always say that if US, of course, if somebody would try to attack US and there would be an occupation, people wouldn't so much, normal residential people, I mean, I'm not talking about military, would be not so much concerned about the country. They would be concerned about their own house, their own property, and, they would be standing on their own front lawn with the shotgun in their hand, protecting their own property. So it's more about me than it's about the collective. And I think that's very true. You think about the history of US in the Wild West and how everybody ran to the West, and they claimed their stake, by claiming their land, and everybody was just out for themselves. So the entire history of this country is based on individualism. I'm not saying that it's a good thing. Necessarily, there's a lot of greed and a lot of things that come out of that. But individual competition is what makes this country what it is here. And, we have to be taught in US to be team-oriented, to be collective. Many countries, some European countries, some Asian countries, probably Middle Eastern countries are much more collective, and teamwork comes much more naturally. Americans, teamwork does not come naturally. So people have to be taught to be team-oriented. That's why sports is so highly appreciated and liked over here, because sports is, teamwork activity, and it's idealized as being, something that we aim towards. Masculinity, femininity. So some societies are much more, feminine. And again, feminine doesn't mean necessarily that, men are feminine, or, it's a little bit different. It's means different kinds of values. So in some countries, Japan, interestingly enough, is very masculine in that, and Korea and a lot of Asian countries. And I'm just talking about them because I used to live in those countries. So, men mostly, run business, and women are domestic, basically take care of the home. And, still traditionally, walking in a street, woman is supposed to walk a couple of steps behind men, and that kind of a thing. Scandinavia, Sweden and Finland, for example, are very feminine countries. That doesn't mean that us men are feminine. That means that we're very equal societies in that, we have, female, prime minister, we've had female president in the past, we have a lot of female corporate leaders and politicians, and men and women are equally working in a society, earning same salaries. The laws are oriented in a ways that both men and women can have maternity and paternity leaves in equal amounts. So there's a very different, value in terms of there's much more feminine values in terms of women considered to be, running the society, much more than men, kind of a thing. Patriarchal versus matriarchal would be one way of putting it, but it's a little bit more cultural, a little bit more complicated than that. Which, by the way, I don't know if anybody has seen the Barbie movie. This is a silly topic, but I just last night, it was released on Max, so I watched it streamed at home with me and my wife, who watched the Barbie movie. And it's a silly movie, obviously, but it is interesting how it, basically is about matriarchal and patriarchal societies. And that's kind of a one way to kind of look at, masculine, feminine, that, masculine societies would be perhaps more patriarchal societies, and feminine societies would be perhaps more matriarchal societies. And it is interesting. My wife is a African American, although she doesn't, really prefer to be called African American, and I don't call her African American because she's never been in Africa, and she doesn't have any national connection to any African country and doesn't speak any African language. I mean, she's American Black. But American Black community society is a matriarchal society. They, way back from maybe perhaps African cultures and after that slavery, time of slavery in the United States, there always was a strong female figure in the family. So, African Black community and culture is led by women for the most part. There's always a strong female character, that kind of is a matriarch of the family. So, I noticed that difference, just between her values and interestingly, they say that Finnish men and Black women in America are very compatible because of the fact that we both have feminine matriarchal values, and typical American person is much more has much more masculine values. So that's that masculinity, femininity. Uncertainty avoidance is the kind of a risk-taking kind of a thing. Some societies don't like to take risks, and they don't like to face uncertainty. They try to avoid uncertainty. US society is relatively low in uncertainty avoidance. US society changes quite a bit because there isn't a lot of hanging into traditions, in the same way. And part of it is why uncertainty avoidance is so low in US is because we are a society of immigrants. And so everybody's sort of different over here. So the society changes relatively quickly. Now, of course, there are political factors with that. There are conservatives versus liberals, and the conservatives, of course, try to hold on to the old, conservative values. So there is a little tug of war there, but there is a relatively openness to change. And European countries, I think there is a fair amount of low kind of uncertainty avoidance in the sense that the societies have had to change toward world wars and everything like that. So I think Western societies in general tend to be probably lower in uncertainty avoidance. Again, Asian societies tend to be holding into traditions and holding into the ways it's always been, maybe a little bit more. So there's a difference between the risk-taking and uncertainty avoidance between countries. And that certainly plays a big part in business dealings, of course. How different business decision makers, deal with things. Long-term orientation and short-term orientation are very, very interesting. US is a very short-term oriented country. I mean, everything in business is looking at the quality profits. And if you have 1 or 2 quarters that you have decline in profits, somebody's going to get fired. Japan on the other hand, and I keep using Japan as an example because it's probably the most obvious example. Japan is very long-term oriented. They look at stock market in a very long patterns, and they're not worried about 1 or 2 year, 1 or 2 quarter or even a year fluctuations. They look at it in a very, very long-term range. Which, if you know about the history of Japanese economy was on track of becoming the largest economy in the world in the 90s. And then they had a stock market collapse. And they are still trying to dig themselves out of it. So they are still looking at, the economy as recovering from the stock crash of stock market crash of the 90s. So it's interesting. I mean, they were definitely moving to be the more powerful, and they were back in those days. There were lots of stories in business school. We're talking about how they were going to be the most powerful and this and that, and how we predicted Japan, the influence of Japan very, very strongly. And then we started seeing kind of the decline of it. It's interesting. I mean, just kind of looking at those patterns. Europeans, I think, are generally speaking a little bit more long-term oriented than Americans are. But again, those are very, very interesting kind of ways of dimensions that we can look at societies, between those. And then, of course, there are legal factors, like I said earlier. Economic systems. Differences in economic systems, of course, tend to translate into differences in human resource management policies. They are market economies, they are planned economies. So market economy would be, in other words, perfect capitalism. Now, there is no perfect capitalism in the world. There is no 100% market economy anywhere in the world. It's an ideal, that what if government would not, control markets at all? What if everything would be free trade, open market, and there would be nothing planned or coordinated or policies, regulations by government, then that would be open market system. Like I said, there is no free open market system anywhere. US, Americans like to talk about capitalism, but this is not a fully capitalist society at all by any stretch. Planned would, of course, be what is typically referred to as communism. We don't talk about capitalism, communism. They're technically economic terms, but unfortunately they have been, become sort of more political terms. So it's better to be talking about market versus planned economies rather than capitalist versus communist, because then you don't have that sort of connotation. You know how Americans are afraid of communism, which is kind of silly, I think, but because, communism, it's a philosophy, it's an economic system, it's a theoretical concept that even Karl Marx himself, when he wrote about, the communist, theory, I mean, he himself recognized that it wasn't going to work, that it was a utopian idea, but that, in practice would not work. It's just that Soviets, took that system to try to use it for political means, and became a dictatorship. So of course you can have communist dictatorships, and you can have capitalist dictatorships, and communist dictatorships became, many countries in the world became communist dictatorships, but that's not saying that that's how Karl Marx meant it as an economic system. But anyway, that's a long story. Planned societies are more socialist, communist type of systems. Mixed would be a combination of both. Now, obviously, all European countries are mixed societies. Some societies are perhaps a little bit more tilting towards that socialist end of it. Scandinavian countries are considered social democrat countries, and we have welfare systems that are pretty unique in the rest of the world. I mean, when I was born and raised in Finland, I certainly, benefited from them. Free healthcare in Finland. I benefited from free healthcare for my first 20 years of my life, and a good quality healthcare. I never had any need for healthcare. Everything was taken care of. There has to be a health clinic within walking distance from every household. So we have good quality health clinics everywhere. Hospitals are free. All of the healthcare is free in Finland. Education is free in Finland. All universities, all schools, everything is free in Finland. So again, by free, I mean they are taxpayer paid. Nothing is free, of course. We pay them through taxes collectively. So Finland is a much more collective society. But it's a mixed society. Finland is a mixed society in that there is still entrepreneurship. There is still capitalism in free enterprise. You can still own companies. You can own property, which in fully capitalist, a communist system, you would not have personal property ownership at all. So United States is a mixed society. We have public transportation in some cities. That's an example of socialist. We have welfare systems like Medicaid, Medicare. We certainly have taxpayer-paid military, which is a humongous planned economy, feature. Taxpayers pay for a lot of those things. Well, military certainly is 100% taxpayer paid. So it's interesting to me how Americans always keep looking at like Scandinavia or European countries as being so significantly more socialist than America is, the United States is, when in reality, United States spends the most in military out of any world by huge stretch, by huge comparison. Look at the military spending, and US spends so much more than even the closest country in the world, the second country in the world. And so, it's all that's taxpayer paid. So how can you how can Americans not admit that that's a socialist trait when we pay the most to military in the world? But anyway, it's the point is that almost every society in the world is a mixed society to a different degrees, and like I said, it's only ironic how people's self-perception about the economy is certain way that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of how much government in reality is involved in everything in a planned kind of a way. And then there's an argument whether it has to be that way or doesn't have to be that way, or people have different ideals about it. But that's, and I'm not going to make a political statement over here. I'm simply just saying that it's interesting sometimes how people don't realize that we are very much of a mixed society, and we are in some ways equal, same level of socialism over here in US than there is probably in Europe. And so all Western countries are pretty, similar in that. Say Asian societies are more or less, mixed economies as well. And I think that most Middle Eastern countries and African countries are probably different mix of mixed societies as well. So I think that there's no perfect market economy and there's no perfect planned economy. There's always different features out there. Now, North Korea would be probably closest to a fully planned economy. We all see that that's not working really well, but that would probably be only remaining. China has certainly become a mixed society, mixed economy, and Cuba has become a mixed, economy. And of course, Soviet Union collapsed because the so-called communist society, didn't really ultimately work in economic sense. And so, yeah, I mean, things change, and they always tilt towards different direction. The European Union, of course, you are somewhat familiar, perhaps in the European Union. There are certain kinds of laws in European Union that are different to US. Minimum European Union wage is different than US minimum wage. Working hours, what's considered to be official working hours, and vacation time and those kinds of things are certainly different in European Union than they are in US. And then, the way how you can terminate employment is a little more complicated in European Union than it is in US. In US, employment at will is still a major doctrine, and basically you can terminate a person for any reason, as long as you have a reason. You don't want to not have a reason, because then somebody can come up with the legal case and saying that your reason was racism or something like that. But those are very different type of things. That's something that I miss about Finland. Finns have 2 months out of the year vacation time, and over here in US, most people have 2 weeks, and sometimes you're lucky to have 2 weeks vacation time. Now, I personally have more than 2 weeks and have had for a long time, because at a certain level of employment, you start earning more, but it's just a huge difference. Europeans take a lot more vacations than Americans. As a result of that, Americans are the most productive society in the world. And I'm not saying that in a positive way necessarily, because it just means that Americans work more than anybody else in the world. Even Japanese are very productive, very workaholic nation, Japan, but they still have more vacation time than US. Americans work the longest hours and the least amount of vacation time in the world. And that shows. People are very unhappy. They're very stressed out. They're very much workaholic, very materialistic over here. And the stress level of Americans has kind of, reached really concerning levels. American Psychological Association, I mentioned that before, they do a survey of Americans in stress every year. And I mean, they've been in increase in the last 10 years. And it's getting problematic. Mental health issues resulting on, from work-related stress are becoming our second pandemic over here. So it's something we need to very much think about. China is, interesting, concerning in a lot of different ways. Of course, after China had the only one-child policy, the workforce was in increase, but they put a stop on it, and they kind of hurt themselves with that. And now they're trying to backpedal from that, and they're actually encouraging people to have children now because their workforce is not growing as quickly as it used to. People and companies are having more difficult time recruiting in China. That's why Chinese have for long now, they have been a major population in US universities and colleges, Chinese exchange students coming in here to get degrees and go back to China. Many US universities have started satellite campuses in China. And so US higher education is benefiting from the demand or need of Chinese people to get educated. And by the way, they are really, really good students. I've had a lot of Chinese students in my classes throughout my career, and they study hard. They have a cultural pressure put on them and family pressure put on them to achieve. And they earn high grades, they earn degrees in, and many of them go to Ivy League universities here, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, MIT, and so they get degrees from those places, and they go back with those degrees to China, and they improve the economy there. But Chinese companies are suffering recruitment-wise. They are, always looking to find the best talent. Selection, Chinese society is interesting because the way you are selected for something is determined from early age. Which kindergarten you go, which elementary school, whatever, it's all kind of a channeled, very early age, determined where you're going to go. And so selection becomes less complicated, if you will, in that people who are trained or geared towards those level positions, that's the direction they are going. And so the pool of candidates for that position is narrower because its society is built in a way that it's pretty much structured. Now, some of that is in Japan as well. I mean, which kindergarten you go is going to be determining which, elementary school, which middle school, which high school, and therefore which college you get to. And which college you get a degree from is going to determine what kind of employment you're going to get. So it's determined from very, very early age. There's not a lot of mobility and not a lot of way of changing, different, different level of society. There's not a lot of mobility between them. It's starting to be that way in US a little bit too. I mean, in New York, for example, there's a huge competition for the best schools. People in New York recognize that the public school system isn't the greatest. So there's a huge competition for elite private schools. And, if you go to a certain private school, you get to a certain college and you get to certain employment. We had a discussion about it last week with somebody, how fundamentally somebody getting a degree from Harvard University, they don't learn anything better or greater than you learn over here or any university in the United States people learn. We all use same textbooks, more or less. Schools are, licensed by the state and they are certified and accredited, by same institutions. So fundamentally, there's no difference between curriculum. One could even say that in Ivy League schools, as well as some top level public universities, your education would be lesser quality in some sense because undergraduate courses, especially, you get taught by graduate assistants, which are doctoral students. You don't even see the actual professor. And, you're sitting in a large dormitory of auditorium of 400 students taking those courses versus teaching universities, smaller private independent schools. You actually get to learn from the professors themselves. So you could make an argument that in some way it's kind of a backwards, but reputation, brand makes all the difference in the world. So it's association. Somebody having a Harvard degree is going to make a difference just because it's Harvard. And that's the way China and Asian societies are very much. They're very, very brand conscious and very conscious of where they go to school. And compensation in China obviously very different than it is in United States. Again, American executives make the most money in the world in executive rankings. It is amazing how much US executives and especially CEOs in certain industries make, and that's why we have some of the richest people in the world, Americans, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, et cetera, is because they make that much money on those roles. Labor unions, of course, very different in China that they are in the United States, being that it's a very planned society in China. But a lot of things are changing in China so rapidly that it's difficult to kind of, really say that, what we say today is different next. There's a lot of economic pressures and a lot of things changing in China. So it's an interesting combination of kind of almost a dictatorship, with the Chinese president, having sort of a, power for life kind of a position now. But yet there's a lot of economic sort of a market society traits of it. So they have a different blend of the plant and market society. We at the university where I was a provost, we had 3 years ago or something, we had a group of 23 or 24 elite Olympic athletes, because we're a sports university, studying in our campus, and they were there for like 2 months, and we could not take them anywhere out of our little town and the next town of us, because Chinese government dictated that they cannot travel anywhere other than 2 different cities, and so they had to pretty much stay here, and we had to go on a computer and we had to file a report every single day on the whereabouts of those students. So the government kept tabs on them. It was just amazing. It's just amazing, how, I mean, we had to report every single day, and so they really do keep tabs on their people. International staffing. There are a lot of different ways to staff an international operation. One would be, having expatriates, meaning that you are shipping all of your executives and workers from the parent country, and so home country, but I mean, it's there. You know what an expatriate is? It's a American executive working in a European or Asian or whatever foreign location, and you hire from your home country, and you send them and you train them to work there, or you could well, I mean, expatriates are typically executives, so typically you only hire the executives from your home country, and maybe other employees hire from local. You could have a strict parent national policy where you hire all of the employees from your parent country and ship them out there as expatriates, which is more rare these days because it's so costly. But that's one extreme, to have home country nationals working in a foreign destination and everybody being from home country. And there obviously are some benefits. Benefits are they all speak same language, they all share the same culture and same. So internally, it's going to be easier, because you have everybody trained in US, everybody in American, whatever. Or if you're a European company, everybody European. But then there's difficulties because how can you understand the host country, the local culture and the local business customs if you don't have any locals working for your organization? So the other option would be to hire a lot of locals that you go to set up your location in a foreign country, and then you go and then you hire those local employees. And then final option would be, you would go, set up your company in other country, and then you hire employees from yet, third country that actually work on that. And those situations, those are your options, kind of, to how do you staff your organization. And of course, there's a pros and cons. When you use local nationals, you have better know-how of the local culture, but you also have less control from the headquarters. Also, cost of staff is always an issue. I mean, companies outsource and set up factories, overseas to take advantage of cheap labor. And so sometimes the very reason of going and putting up that factory in other countries to be able to hire locals with a lot less wages than you would, pay to expatriates. So typically then you would go and you would hire expatriates to run the factory and then hire locals. But if you really want to have more impact or more welcoming attitude, in a local community, you hire the local executives from a local community as well. Sometimes you can hire, you can set up a factory in one country because logistics or raw materials, but maybe in that country the labor is not very inexpensive, or maybe you don't have trained enough, educated enough population to be able to hire. So maybe you hire from a third country, but you ship them to work in that other country because that's where the raw materials are. So there's so many different scenarios and reasons why one staffing strategy may work, over another one. And expatriates are particular difficulty because you have to expatriate somebody, you have to train them to work in that country. And then when they are done working in that country and you want to bring them back to headquarters, you have to repatriate them because now they are accustomed to work in that other country and they have to be, reaccustomed to working back at home. And unfortunately, many times expats, they lose promotions and things in a home country, in a headquarters, because many times that foreign experience isn't counted equally to, promotions in a home country. So there are some problems in expatriate. It's very expensive, and also you also have to train the family because after 1 year of expatriates, deployment, the biggest factor of whether or not they stay in that job is a spouse. So when the spouse says that, look, I don't want to stay here anymore, we need to go back home. In many cases, the expat is going to end up going back home. So yeah, the expatriates would be completely other discussion, and we'll talk about that a little bit more after break. But those are your kind of staffing options for international global business. So let's have a break. It's 11 over here, so 15 minutes from now we'll come back. See you soon. Okay. I think it's 15 after right now, so we can continue. Any questions at this point, or any stories, any comments, anything anybody wants to share? Don't be shy. So a couple of more points about the staffing policy. These are just some of the terms that is being used out there, and it's kind of interesting, to kind of differentiate some of that. So when we talk about ethnocentrically oriented company, well, ethnocentrically oriented company would be one who is, as you can know, ethnocentrism refers to cultural stereotyping or cultural bias, where when you go to another country, you are like, oh, in my country everything is so much better, and this is the way we do. So ethnocentric person is the person who is not able to assimilate into a new country, a new culture, because they think that their own culture is so much better. And so that's kind of a ethnocentrically oriented companies are companies where, let's say it's an American company, since we are we are American university. So let's just say an American company goes to Finland, and so they go to Finland and say, yeah, we are American company, and our American ways of doing business are the best way of doing business, and we're going to bring our executives from US, as expatriates to run our business over here, and we're going to maintain all, American values in our business and all of that. That would be an ethnocentrically oriented company. And now, as you probably know, and most people have, noticed that American companies, historically speaking, have been ethnocentrically oriented companies. When you would go back to I don't know, 100 years or something like that, if you were majority of multinational companies or global companies out there were American. So when you thought about international business, you almost always thought about American companies, moving and operating and doing business in other countries. Now, certainly there were a small number of, European companies and this and that, and maybe Asian companies, they're in a mix as well, but majority of them were American companies. Now that has changed dramatically. These days, there are much more Asian companies, whether it's Chinese or Japanese, Korean, etc., going to other countries, including United States. I mean, we have here in Alabama, we have Hyundai, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW factories. So all of the SUV models of both Mercedes-Benz and BMW, they are all built here in Alabama. So that didn't used to occur back in the day. Right now it's much more common for other countries to come and set up their factories in US and not vice versa. And now there are also a lot more companies from smaller countries that didn't used to really be in a global marketplace that are now going and operating in different countries. So the ethnocentricity is changing, somewhat, because US does not, well, there is still many Americans who do, but in general, American companies cannot perceive themselves as being dominant like they used to be back in the day. It used to be, everybody else had to learn English because American executives spoke English, and Americans got to kind of insist that you do business in our way. It's like I said, it's changing and has changed dramatically. So now there are way more companies are polycentric. Their values are a mix of home country and a host country. And so many times they have the unique kind of a organizational culture is kind of a blend of different cultures. And the next step of that would be to be a true global company. Now, there are many companies that are true global companies. IBM, one could argue, was probably one of the first ones that was truly global company, in that these companies don't even care anymore where their headquarters are. They approach to everything is truly global. They hire people from wherever they find the best talent, and they take advantage of whatever country's taxation or legal, system is. Apple, for example, there was a lot of criticism some 10 years ago or something, that Apple basically didn't pay any taxes in the United States. They had all their operations somewhere else. Now Apple has tried to change that a little bit to improve their reputation, and so they have a little bit more facilities and operations in US right now. But many companies, Nokia is still a big company, but they don't do cell phones anymore. They do more artificial intelligence and cloud computing and big network stuff. And so, but Nokia, especially back in the day when they were number one in cell phones in the world, they only had headquarters in Helsinki, Finland, and manufacturing in China, training in San Diego, United States, etc. I mean, they would be scattered all over the world. So nowadays there are many of these strictly global companies, who just really they just go wherever where they can benefit the most. So one could say that they're only loyal to the money profits, not so much loyal to any country or any culture. We already talked about the expats versus locals. I mean, it's a specific policy of what degree you use combination of expatriates versus locals. Sometimes you have the top executives being expats, and then middle managers and everybody below being locals. That's a fairly common mix, but more and more companies are moving completely local managers to assimilate and take advantage of the local customs and culture better. So again, it depends what kind of product and what kind of business you have. Keep in mind that no company has to be following any of these. It's not like there's a book and says you have to choose one or another. You can use variety combination of a lot of other solutions and different mixes in different countries, kind of a thing. Or you can offshore things completely to another company in other country and completely, use them as vendors and completely offshore your work to them. And offshoring has becoming fairly common. Many companies have offshored the customer service, for example, to India. And it's just a company in India who takes them as a client, and they provide this phone center, call center, customer service type of function to them. That's why when you are, calling, Verizon or AT&T, and you have somebody with an accent, so that would be why, because they are outsourced it. Reducing expatriate cost, well, using expatriates less would be obviously one way, but expatriates are expensive. They just are expensive, and one of the biggest part of why expatriates are expensive is because of the turnover. There's a lot of turnover among expats. Many times they only stay really short period of time. And that's why the way to reduce the cost of expats to do comprehensive, cultural sensitivity training, that you train the expat on the new cultures, customs and traditions and language and everything as well as possible before you send them out there. That reduces the likelihood that they're going to fail in the assignment and come back. And then you also train the family, and then you take care of the family. You make sure that the family are provided in so that they have a similar life, living standard in that destination country that they experienced in the United States. So, for example, with me, if I would go, I don't know, any country, pick a country. If I would go to Japan, and my wife would go with me. Well, my wife wouldn't have a work permit. We actually did. This is a realistic scenario because we actually were offered an opportunity to go with University of Maryland to go to Japan, and we ended up not going there because of the fact that it would have been difficult for her. We also got an offer to go to Papua New Guinea and didn't do that because the same situation. You have to worry about the fact that your spouse will not be able to work, so you have to be making sure that you provide them equal, and that's tricky sometimes because sometimes people in US, they have a relatively cozy lifestyle in the suburbs, and to go and experience that kind of lifestyle somewhere else, would be hard. My wife is used to living in a, relatively large house here in Alabama. And, you go to Tokyo or even Europe, and you would live in a small apartment, and in some instances in bigger cities, that would be difficult. So the company has to make sure that their spouse is comfortable, and that if that expat has kids, that the kids go to good, schools and all of that stuff, and that is roughly similar to what they would have had in their home country. Otherwise, it's likely that the expat is not going to succeed, and they're going to turn around and leave. But of course, one way to reduce an expatriate cost is to go more local. I mean, hire more executives and managers, from a local community. It's easier to train them in a company ways than it is to, train expat into the cultural ways of that culture. So letting go of that ethnocentricity and having good procedures and good management systems that do not depend on somebody's cultural background, and what the home country is probably the best way of reducing expat cost. Now, of course, today's world, we are virtual, virtual teams. And a lot of companies have accepted the fact that you can have people, from different parts of the world, working with you. It is difficult sometimes. There are obviously technologies, and we've talked about this already. There are technologies can help with collaboration and cooperation, but just time differences, the impersonal aspect of just dealing through computers, the isolation that people, experience. There are lots of problems with these virtual teams, but things are now possible that were not possible, in the past. and it makes people think about, how they can operate without really meeting in person. And obviously, it's possible. I've ran management teams and run organizations where I, for a decade, did not meet people that I was working with every single day, that I never met them in person. It's possible, but it's not optimal, of course. But there are ways to do it. Selecting international managers, expatriates, you have to use a little bit more stringent, normal, more detailed criteria and search criteria that you would normally. I mean, it's very, very important that you do a realistic review. I mean, just between United States and Europe. I mean, a lot of people, I don't know, I guess Americans are just so spoiled in some ways. And I gotta say that I am sometimes too. When I go to Europe, in US, you go to hotels, you have a, king size bed, and in Europe, in Italy or something, you go to a hotel and you have, a lot smaller bed. And it's not a big deal really to me, but some people it's a big deal. Just small differences like that. They impact people more than people realize. They're so accustomed to the same thing, like something as silly as getting a free refill, when you have a Coca-Cola or Diet Coke, whatever. In US, you are used to the fact that, they bring you refills as many as you want. And then you go to Europe and, you don't get ice on your drink and you don't get a free refill and you're like, what's going on? It's silly, small thing, but those are the things that actually catch people because they can't prepare mentally those small things. It's the big things that they are thinking about, but the small things, are often the ones that impact them the most. When I was living in Seoul, South Korea, I lived in a part of the town called Itaewon, next to Yangsan military base, large US military base. And I went to work in a base to teach courses in an education center there for soldiers and some Korean students as well. And but I lived outside of the gates, and this was a very westernized part of Seoul, probably the most westernized. And there was a bar called Five Alley Bob right next to my apartment building. And so I went there, hang out whenever I was kind of lonely, and went sit down in a bar. And it was a Bob, English style Bob, owned by a German and an Australian guy, which is interesting. Why would they run an English style Bob? One German, one Australian. Anyway, and so it was kind of a home of the expatriates. All the expatriates would come to this particular Bob. And so I would be sitting out there and talking with the expats from around the world, and had some really, really good discussions with people out there and learned a lot about what was going on in their mind. And it turned out that it was not the language or the currency or, some of those things that you would think that would be the obvious differences. It was really relationships, way to understand Koreans, way to deal with the customs and culture and people in general. That's what really, really was bothering them. And just small stuff like that. Like I said, I mean, just that, you go to a McDonald's or Burger King in Korea and it just doesn't taste like McDonald's or Burger King. It just tastes different. And some people are bothered by those kinds of things. It's just funny. I mean, for me in Korea, and this may sound like completely silly, I did not like to live in Korea because I cannot stand the smell of kimchi. I don't like the taste of kimchi and I cannot stand the smell of kimchi. So, I mean, the beautiful culture, Korean culture is beautiful, great people, a lot of great things about Korea. But I like Japan so much more because everything didn't smell like kimchi. And I just could not get used to the smell of kimchi everywhere. Rotten cabbage. I couldn't get used to it. And that's just a small little thing that can really, and so I found that I thought that I was relatively global citizen. I've been traveling around the world, lived in many different places. And first time in my life, I realized that it wasn't as easy for me to adapt as I thought that it was. That there are these small things that I would never have been able to prepare for. So when you are selecting expatriates, you need to make sure that you do screening, and you need to make sure that you talk about those kinds of small things of adaptability. Testing, there are cultural sensitivity tests that test people's attitude towards other culture and other people, their open-mindedness. That may be good. And, you gotta, there are sometimes legal issues, that can get into, I mean, people have to be comfortable with the laws of the other country and make sure that those don't, get in a way so that you train the person on the legal system of the other country before you send them there. So those would be, factors. Personality. I mean, there is an expat personality. Without a doubt, some people are not cut up to be expats, and some people, that's really cool for them and they enjoy it. So you gotta, identify the expat personality, otherwise they'll come back. Family pressures, like I said, again, realistic previews is more important in international assignments than in normal assignments. I mean, you gotta keep them a realistic job review, so that they can realistically understand that it's gonna be more challenging. And again, you need to screen the family as well, and do an improved orientation, including the family in that orientation. Very, very important stuff, because without those kind of considerations, you're probably going to be wasting a lot of money on that expat out there, and you're going to be, retraining somebody again next year. So doing this well helps to save money, and that's really the biggest. And it's not just about money. It's just being able to ensure that your business practices are successful. Now, sending women managers abroad is an extra tricky thing. So, for example, if you know that in Asia, for example, in Korea or Japan, it is not common for Japanese women to be in business negotiations and a high level of business there, and that the Japanese and Korean men may not feel comfortable if they would have a female executive. So would you send a female expatriate there? Now, in one hand, you want to embrace the diversity and you want to, comply with U.S. Laws, not discriminating against women. But on the other hand, you also want to be mindful of the fact that in that country it may not be completely okay or accustomed, in their culture. So it's a tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing. And obviously Middle Eastern countries, there are some countries in the Middle East where obviously, you would have those kind of considerations. So I don't know, you all probably understand and have experiences of all of these things more than I do. And I think that, everywhere in the world, we should be equal and women should be treated equal to men. But I also recognize that that's not the case in some countries. And so obviously it is more difficult in some countries for women to operate than it is for men. And maybe things are changing, but that certainly is something for companies to keep in mind and be considerate of. And so what are sort of practical solutions to the expat challenge? Like I said, expat failure is expensive. We already kind of talked about a lot of these, realistic job review. Try to make the assignment shorter, if you can, so that you don't expect people to be there 10 years. Make the assignments, 1 year, 2 year assignments, so that there's it's easier for people to deal with it if they know that there's a definite date that they're returning. And if not, provide them vacation time, provide them opportunities to for them to come back home for a certain amount of time and meet their family, extended families or whatever. Use internet-based video technologies and group decision-making software to kind of enable global virtual teams to conduct business without relocation, if possible. And if you have to relocate them, make sure that they have ways to keep in touch with the folks in the US. I mean, US military has gotten pretty good at this. I mean, they understand that soldiers in deployment in other countries, you know, they miss their families miss them. So they have, you know, computer centers, computer labs set up out there so that they can, you know, have their visiting hours, if you will. You know, they can, you know, do video streaming, Skyping, you know, whatever, you know, WhatsApping, you know, with their families. You can also form these global body programs where you can have local managers helping new expatriates. When I was working for University of Maryland, you know, they had a couple of secretary level employees, Korean ladies working for our Ed Center, and they drove us around, helped us to set up our apartments, to, you know, to you know, whatever it was, you know, get off our cell phones, things like that, you know, because I mean, when you go to a foreign country, it's easy to get difficult to get cell phone activated, you know, without knowing how the system goes and whatever. So they would help us to get these things going on. So it helped a lot. You can use executive coaches to mentor and work with expat managers. I mean, you can do that virtually. I do executive coaching, and you know, I do it online virtually. So some of my clients are in foreign countries, and it's relatively easy these days to do. So you know, orientation and training. You obviously want to do pre-departure training, cultural sensitivity training, but you also want to do ongoing training. You know, so don't just leave it at that. Do repeat training and maintain it all throughout. One area of training that you really want to focus on is ethics and codes of conduct. You know, there are certain things that, you know, are okay in your country that are not okay in other country. You know, alcohol consumption, for example, you may be getting away in a US city to get a little bit toasted and you know, walking around in the street drunk, but you certainly don't want to do that in some other country. Ethics, you know, I mean, just a lot of things, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, ethical conduct, you know, anything from dress code, what kind of, you know, outfits are appropriate, and, you know, how do you behave and, you know, conduct yourself. It's just very, very important to understand. You know, it's not like, it goes both ways. In one hand, you cannot necessarily assume that your cultural ways of behaving and ethics are, you know, accepted in that other country, but it's also goes the other way around. You know, sometimes they say, when in Rome, act like Romans. No, I don't think so. I mean, if I don't believe in child labor here in the United States, and I would go to, you know, foreign assignment somewhere, I wouldn't want to, you know, hire child labor in that country either, even though in that country it may be acceptable. You know, I mean, I like dogs. I wouldn't eat a dog. And I'm aware of the fact that in Korea, you know, they do eat dogs. Now it's made a little bit illegal there, but it's still a custom if they eat dogs. Well, maybe they don't eat Siberian Huskies. Maybe it's a different type of more of a, you know, I mean, I don't know what kind of dogs they eat. But my point is, if I don't think that eating dogs is good from in my home country, I wouldn't go to Korea and eat dogs either. So we need to think about these codes of conduct, you know, what is okay, what is not okay. And, you know, they're not simple stuff, you know, often. We need to really, you know, there can be some serious discussions we need to have with expats and employees about what is okay, what is not okay. Because there are certainly some countries where certain things are you know, legal and okay that would never be okay in our society. And so, yeah, we don't necessarily want our expats to go crazy. Performance appraisals for international, you know, managers have to take those kinds of challenges and issues into consideration. Cultural differences, who does the appraisal, what the appropriate people to do the appraisal, you know, adapt the criteria to the local job. You know, you can't assume that it be exactly saying that it would be, you know, headquarters would be okay in the you know, foreign assignment. Weight evaluation more towards the on-site manager's appraisal than the headquarters manager's appraisal, and you know, use a former expatriate from the same overseas location for advice. You know, those are kind of obvious steps, but yet, you know, I mean, obvious is not always obvious. People don't always do the right things. Compensating managers abroad, balance sheet approach. You have to consider the total expenses that somebody has. You can't just turn around and say, okay, here's your salary. You need to look at how in different countries, when you go out there, you have to purchase certain services. You have to pay for tuition for your kids. You have to, a lot of different things that may be different in that country. So you have to look at the total. You have to make sure that the person is able to live comfortably, and all of those nuances are taken into account. And that's what makes it often expensive. And also there are nuances like if my company would send me in a foreign assignment and I would have to stay there for a year, well, I'm not going to sell my house here during that period of time because I'm coming back. So my company would have to pay enough for me to be able to afford apartment in that foreign country and still pay for my my house over here, maybe even my car payment, because I don't want to sell my car for a year. And so whatever those things are, you have to take those into consideration. You may have to pay some incentives, foreign service premium. We were paid $1,000 a month extra in Korea, just because of Korea. Seoul is such an expensive city. So we were paid a premium just, to be able to live in that economy out there. Hardship allowance, if you go, somewhere where it's, harder, what hardship allowance is. Anyway, I mean, I worked in a military community, and they were trying to get us to some assignments that were more difficult than others, and more dangerous parts of the world, and they would have paid hardship allowance. I wasn't interested in going there. I liked where I was, but anyway, you understand what I'm saying. And mobility premiums. If you are asked to be mobile in the University of Maryland, theoretically, they could order me to move to a different location every 8 weeks. Now, it didn't happen to me because the courses that I was teaching and a lot of different factors. But people, if they would be asked to relocate frequently, they would be paid mobility premium for the fact that they were asked to be mobile like that. And for a lot of people, it's great. A lot of people enjoy that mobility. At the time in my life, I enjoyed it. But I was single, I didn't have kids. Now when I'm, married and I have kids and 2 dogs, that wouldn't be, easy at all for me. So I would not be able to do that without abandoning my family. So, with these pay issues, you need to set strategy, identify those crucial executive behaviors, have a global philosophy framework, identify cap system as pay systems, adapt pay policies. So there's a whole process that you can go through to make sure that this thing works, because the cultural and all other issues are one thing, but obviously if you cannot pay the person so that it makes sense for them to go to that foreign assignment, they're not going to do it. And if you can't get them to do it, then your business is not going to be successful, if that is the way you want to do it. So it's not always it's not cheap, and it's not always easy. Union relationships can be tricky. You have more vigorous collective bargaining negotiations in a lot of other countries. Safety, one of the reasons that I didn't go to Papua New Guinea, sorry, I almost ran over my dog over here with my share. With my Papua New Guinea was very fascinating. There was a Polytech University there, and they wanted me to go out there as an administrator. I almost took the job, but then my wife started looking at some articles about, crime and safety out there, how people pretty much have to live in apartments with, with the bars on their windows, to make sure that they don't get robbed and stuff like that. And she just became so concerned about the safety that she said, no way we are going. And, happy wife, happy life. When she says something, I have to obey. So at the end of the day, that's the way it goes. So you have to make sure that you're protecting your own international assignees, and international travelers, because some environments, can be a little more. But it's also interesting that sometimes we have to be realistic about this. especially in, Americans, sometimes Americans get worried about safety in foreign assignments when in reality, the places where they expatriate are much safer than US cities. And that's sometimes for people difficult to understand because they're ethnocentric views. But if you are moving from Los Angeles to Japan or Seoul, I mean, yeah, they are all big cities, but Los Angeles is 10 times more dangerous than Seoul or Japan. European cities, for the most part, are much more safer than any major American city. So we also cannot have this attitude that, everything is automatically, less safe, in foreign assignments. It may be other way around, and many times is. So you can't take excessive, protective measurements, but at the same time, you gotta, take into consideration. Some places, Latin America, kidnapping and ransom, those are real issues. They happen, and they target expats many times. So you do want to have kidnapping and ransom insurance. So if somebody gets, picked up, you can pay the ransom and, maintain their safety. So many times, you waste that investment. So repatriation, like I said, is important. That when person comes back, from their foreign assignment, you retrain them and come back because many times people just leave. They leave their company completely if they are unhappy with the foreign assignment. So many times all that training and everything becomes wasted investment if you don't make sure that you train them when they expatriate and then repatriate, help them to adapt back. Many companies, do that kind of, it's difficult to come back. I mean, I was in Korea only 1 year, but it was a little difficult for me to come back. I mean, there were certain things that I kind of gotten used to in 1 year in Korea that just were not here. And so that was, I had some friends who were there for many years in Japan or Korea, and they just started feeling that like a home. And it was difficult for them to come back to US. They started seeing those things that in US society, that when you live over here, you kind of overlook those things and you don't think anything of it. But when you live in a foreign country for a while, then you come back over here. Now all of a sudden you start seeing shortcomings in our society over here, and it's just making, driving you crazy. It's just so insane. And so it becomes problematic. Our perspective changes when we travel a lot. When that happens, they lose knowledge and experience, obviously. So they have to understand that. And there are certain steps in repatriation. I mean, there's the immediate culture shock, and then there are those little longer effect kind of things that have to be, changed. The simplest thing is that companies have to learn how to value the expats' experience more. They have to value the fact that whatever they learned out there in foreign assignment is indeed applicable to their jobs in, back in the headquarters. Because many times what happens is that, okay, whatever happened out there, well, it doesn't apply over here, so now you have to catch up over here. So if you want people to go to expat assignments, respect what they experienced there and value what they learned there, and make sure that they know that. Business travel, you all who travel or not know that travel has changed dramatically. I mean, we often, we here in US, we talk about post 9/11, pre 9/11. 9/11 changed our, business travel culture dramatically. It used to be so easy to go, especially domestic travel. I mean, you didn't have to go any safety gates or anything like that. You just go out there, walk straight to the gate, and it would be just so different. And now, of course, you have to go to the airport hours early, make sure you go through safety screening and all of that. And so business travel has changed, and now we have to consider that as well, that many people who they used to perhaps like to travel before, now they don't. And also we have to teach people not to draw attention to themselves. I mean, when you go to a certain country, don't buy T-shirts and make yourself stick out of the crowd or whatever. I mean, if you want to fit in, then then try to fit in and try to respect that country's customs and not look like a tourist all the time. And so that's also important. Business travelers have to understand that if you want to conduct safe business and whatever, and you go, I don't know, whatever the examples were, you go certain parts of the country, if you want to become a target of robbery or kidnapping or something, well, if you put a big old I'm American T-shirt on, then people are going to say, yeah, there's an American, let's kidnap them. So don't do that. Make sure that you travel using international sort of neutral outfits. Make sure that you don't draw excessive attention to yourself. Your luggage doesn't have huge stickers or whatever. You don't have to be showing off who you are, where you are from. Try to blend in to your traveling environment. If you're just traveling, not being an expatriate, but just traveling a lot for your business, just try to look like a traveler, like not like a, tourist who is vacationing and try to show off where they are. So those are kinds of things that people have to be also trained on, how to business travel, incognito, how to be professional and how to not stick out, in different places that they go. So, yeah, I mean, all of this is sort of repetitive, engagement around the globe. You would have employee engagement guide for managers, how to get engaged, I mean, I'm not talking about engaged like in a marriage. I'm talking about engaged with the organization and how to, be part of their, because sometimes what happens is that when you're on a foreign assignment, the headquarters forgets you. So you have to make sure that you have engagement strategies for keeping employees engaged all over the world. These things are, they are difficult to, in reality, a lot of it has to do with the personality and type and whatever. What I've noticed, in my background and history with these things, some people just they are capable of being expats and some people are not. They are same way like entrepreneurs. Some people have entrepreneurial personalities and some people don't. So if I would be doing this in a company, I would spend way more time into selection and identifying the right kinds of personalities and attitudes, and then of course training them. But I mean, I feel like some people, it's difficult to train them because they just, for whatever reason, they have an ethnocentric perspective, their attitude, and they're just not going to be successful no matter what, and no matter how you try to engage them or train them or whatever. With some people, you're just going to be having much more success, and identifying those personality traits and attitudes that makes people much more successful. I think that's really the way to go. So yeah, there's some best practices. Implement the international HR systems and practices and allocate adequate resources. Develop those international HR systems by forming global HR teams and networks, and then take steps to ensure the system is acceptable to those who must implement it, such as by investigating pressures to differentiate practices. So, it's kind of a revolving cycle. Those global HR systems, networks, HR networks, you have a whole department often that deals with those kinds of things, and they make certain that they have a whole infrastructure and system in place that assists people and keeps them engaged and supports them. It's just again, military, U.S. military, they have their own department that deals with all of that stuff. Truly global organizations find it easier to install global systems. So if you are truly global organization, you're not ethnocentric, you're not polocentric, you are truly global, and you look at your entire outlook and philosophy and management philosophy is truly global. And when you are truly global like that, then it's easier for those companies to install these global systems because they see that as being an important part of who they are. And of course, pressures are different for everybody and different locations and everything. So you have to investigate these kind of different pain points and pressures in different locations and differentiate them and determine their legitimacy. What happens in one country may not be the same that happens in another country. And just because somebody claims that something's happening doesn't always mean that it's legitimate. You also have to kind of understand what's really going on. And so, yeah, I mean, have a strong organizational culture, because that gives people a backbone and kind of a feeling of safety that they are part of that system. Constant contact, communicate. Dedicate adequate resources and communicate with people. That's really important. So anyway, it gets kind of repetitive here at the end, but that's basically what I have to say about that. Does anybody have any comments? Is anybody an expat? How many of you are expatriates, working in a foreign country for your, company from your home country? Well,
Hi, Tomi. Yeah,
hey,
so
Samia.
so initially when me and my husband came to States, we actually came as expatriate. I would say that we actually came on a visa which was really linked to the company. It's called L2. I don't know if you're aware. So in that scenario, my husband actually came and he was working for this company, and he gave him the visa, and then I also got that L2 visa. So he got L1 and I got L2. So we were in the similar condition that we came here, and he was working. Initially I was not working, but since I had that visa, thank God, I could start working immediately.
Yep.
Yeah, but we were in that situation, as you have been sharing your Korea story. For a while I was that when we switched to H1, I was on H4, and for certain years I was not able to work because of that visa. And thanks to Obama for bringing that H4 visa on our plate, that I started working back after getting that visa. So yeah, it was like little difficult staying home when you're a working professional. It was difficult to stay home just because of visa conditions and issues. One more point I want to bring, as you bought the working here in States as compared to working in the home country. So the major difference, what I have been experiencing, is that the job security is not here. Like I used to feel more secure working in my country in New Delhi, India, than here. That because there was no such at will concept there. Like here we have this at will concept that even without a reason your employer throw you out, right? And you knowingly sign it because you think, okay, you need a job, and you just sign it and you get into that job. and and most of the times, like 99% of the times, it's not your job performance, it's not your that you're not doing good. It's most of the times the politics, and because of the politics happening, and that core thing you just shared, that people from other countries might sometimes feel like they're coconut hard from outside and soft from inside. That's very true. And other way around about about American people, it's other way around, and sometimes it becomes difficult for them to understand us. They might think like, okay, this is a very strong personality and would be very difficult to manage this person. And I have spoken to many people, and now I'm into leadership from last many years. I became BA lead, and I manage few BAs under me, sometimes QAs also under me. So I have been in those situations, and I think it became helpful that working as a leader, I can protect them, and working as a team. And it's like it becomes very crucial and important to understand the culture and differences, so that we can work as a team in around the globe, for sure.
Yeah, good points. Excellent. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, the peaches and coconuts really resonates with me too, because I mean, I've lived 30 years in the United States, and I still perceive Finland, my home country, as the safe place. Psychologically safe, employment, probably, job security wise. I know that if I get seriously sick, I would fly back to Finland. I mean, because I would trust the healthcare there better. I'm, I still feel like that's the safe harbor, the safe place for me. And I still, after 30 years in the United States, I feel like it's a jungle out here. In the United States, it's a, yes, can you, make good money over here in certain segments? Yes, the opportunity is here, but the danger is also here. I mean, it can be very cruel. If you don't have health insurance over here, you are in trouble many times. The society is not super welcoming. And yes, Americans are like beaches. I have throughout 30 years, and I don't mean this to sound like complaining or anything, but
Yeah.
almost all of the people that I associate with or interact with, they are foreigners. I don't really have a lot of American friends. I mean, a lot of acquaintances and a lot of work buddies and these kind of things, but true friends, yeah, very, very few American friends, because I just don't see eye to eye with them. And I mean, my wife is American, but she's also a minority. But I understand so well what you're talking about. Absolutely. And, I can imagine that staying home as a spouse would be difficult here.
No, yeah,
Yes.
definitely. And thankfully my situation changed like I think it's been many years now. But yeah, I was relating to myself when you were sharing your wife story when you were living in Korea. So I think thankfully that things changed. But yes, that is true. That's why I ended up working as a contractor, so that I'm no longer a full-time employee and I don't have to deal with dirty politics anymore.
Yes.
And I'll
Yeah.
just work my timing and done, shuttle down, and there I go. So yeah, that's what I decided for myself. And thank you for sharing all the stories. And that's why I felt that I should share something. So
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, because I mean, I have a feeling like a lot of us have had similar, I mean, I'm a first generation immigrant, so I understand. I didn't intend to immigrate over here, but it just sort of happened. And now I feel like I can't go back, I mean, legally, of course, I could go back. I'm a Finnish citizen too, but culturally it would be difficult. So, Chilo,
no,
you wanted to say
it's
something?
very difficult. You can go there. I go every year for a month, and I stay with my family in India. We have a multi-floor there. I live there like a home. But then after a month, I feel like, okay, it's time to go back home. It's my home now.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
16
I feel the same way.
here,
I feel
probably
the same way.
it becomes very difficult to go back and start living there for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you understand how these things are, and many of you here probably understand. And I mean, we are increasingly more global economy. Globalization is here to stay. So these are increasingly more important topics to be thinking about. Anybody else? You have any stories and thoughts?
So overall, there's no place like home.
Yeah,
Right?
true.
Especially this Christmas, you can feel your emptiness.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I feel maybe more emotional and more in my feelings during Christmas, because Finland, we have snow, during Christmas time, and Christmas is very important in Finland. We always joke about it that Santa Claus is from Finland. So yeah, I mean, I get very nostalgic about it. I mean, I haven't seen snow for so many years because I live in the south here, and it just doesn't feel the same. And yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, especially home is home. It's always going to be home that way, and people, it, nobody really understands it like first generation immigrants. When you're living away from home, most of your life, and but your heart is still there, in some strange way, even if you really don't want to go back anymore for whatever reasons. I mean, I don't have any reason not to go back to Finland. I mean, it's a beautiful society, and I mean, great people. I mean, I can't really say anything real negative about Finland. Helsinki is a great city, but it's not for me anymore. And I don't think I would be able to find a suitable job, and it would be difficult for me to do what I do, there, because it's different. So it's sad in a way, but I'm trying to, it's never going to be home here, fully in 100%. But
Yeah.
that's the way it
So
is to be an immigrant.
yeah, for me, if I will die, I need to go back in my
Yes.
country, whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, true. I know how you feel. Yeah. Well, all of you who are, you know, immigrants or expats, you know, I hope that you are able to connect with your family and friends and people back home during this holiday season, whatever holiday you celebrate. I celebrate Yule, which is you know, really technically a pagan holiday, but in Finland we call, you know, Christmas Joulu, and it comes from you know, really the Nordic pagan traditions of Yule. And so I don't necessarily celebrate the traditional Christmas. I think that that's why we say happy holidays, because everybody celebrates different things. Not that it matters really. I mean, it's still the same traditions for the most part, but theoretically in Finland we don't call it Christmas. So, but I still celebrate Christmas the Finnish way, and that's the home is always going to be home. So, you know, I hope that you're able to connect with your family and have a peaceful holidays. We will have one more of these lectures next weekend. We're gonna, you know, do the chapter 18, and then after that, we'll, you know, it'll be the end of this course and our, you know, interactions. But you always know where I am, and I'm gonna keep up with your grading and stuff. So let's, you know, finish strong. And if you haven't submitted something, go ahead and submit, and I'll try to keep up with grading. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the weekend.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.